Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is July 13th, 2023. Will each commissioner state their name?
Justin Day.
Sarah Hayward Olivas.
Kevin Wade.
Michaela Hammer.
I'd like to move to the approval of the minutes for the June 8th, 2023 meeting. I was not present for this meeting. I think, but you and Mr. Wade were, so I think and move forward with the approval of them.
Is that the procedure? Will there be
I move to approve and dismiss the readings.
second?
All in favor?
Aye. Motion approved. I move to postpone the approval of the May 9th, 2023 meeting until the August meeting. The other two members that were present were not here. A second.
I don't understand the resolution.
So I was not present. You and Mr. Day weren't present at that meeting, but the other two members, it was postponed to the last meeting to
What
do with
what
this
was
meeting.
postponed?
The approval.
the
of the May
approval of
minutes.
the May meeting minutes, because I was not there, so I'm not. I don't know if I'm entirely sure of the reasoning for that.
At the June 8th meeting, Mr. Wade and Mr. Day were absent. So only Matt and Lisa were here. And that did not need a quorum to vote on the May minutes,
This is to vote to accept.
to accept the May minutes, correct? That was why it was tabled.
I make a motion to accept the May minutes. Any seconds?
Well, the May minutes,
You were not
The
here and
people
Justin wasn't
present.
here.
the only one
Oh.
person who was here.
Yeah,
at that
You
meeting
you
was
have to
present.
be here.
Yes.
Yes, well, yeah.
You're not asking this sitting to
No,
approve.
no.
Yeah,
You're
I'm-
asking the people who were sitting that
Mhm.
evening,
Correct. So in
but you
June,
don't have a
you
quorum
and
for that.
Justin were not here, and Matt and Lisa did not need a quorum to vote on the May minutes.
And you still don't.
Right. So they'll have to be postponed. until-
So we will postpone
To the
the
August
May
meeting.
and June meeting minutes until
I think they'll get read.
next August. Or this coming August, next month.
So we're postponing vote.
Yes. So then I'd like to put forward a motion to postpone the reading of the May 9th, 2023 minutes and the June 8th, 2023 minutes until our next meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay, so let's move on. First order of business, we have 203 Chestnut Street. It looks like this is a tier 1 that was,
It was, yes, it was a tier 1 that was projected.
That's the.
Yeah.
Right.
you want to tell us a little bit about this thing?
Yeah, I think this was the one that was a proposal to do some roofing and flat roof work, but also to replace the siding on the front of the home with a hardy plank. And the guidelines say that, and this is a contributing building, and the guidelines say that alternate materials for exterior cladding are not appropriate on the elevations that are visible from the public right of way. And this is the front one. So we said in the review that the finding was that the roofing replacement and all that work was good to go. The siding did not meet the HAC guidelines and standards and was not approved we also put that in the comments, any kind of in-kind or wood siding replacement material would be appropriate. So if they want to move ahead with wood, that would be appropriate.
And that's the result of your tier one
Mhm.
review.
Yeah.
Does a homeowner have something to share with us?
No, I came behalf on the homeowner if I
Yes.
may. Oh, yes, of course. So what we were proposing, thank you.
Excuse me, can you state your name, please?
My name is Matt James.
And you're
I'm
representing,
with Ferris Home Improvements. We are dealing with Mr. Banning's project. We've already done the roof. And we were waiting for hopefully some sort of approval on the siding. What we were proposing was he's having a lot of issues with the front of the house, wood rotting, which you guys know is an issue a lot in there, of course, with wood. And the cost of wood is about the same as hardy plank at this point because it's not a very popular item. There's not many people that do it. So we have proposed putting hardy board on there instead of wood, which in most historic communities, hardy board is like the go-to for a like product for wood that looks like it, even though it doesn't rot or have issues like that. And I do have a permit of a building that was in historic Newcastle that we had approved, that historically reviewed and all of that, and they allowed us to put hardy on the building. So I'm hoping that we can find some sort of way to allow this if possible.
Hardy plank's been used in the district, but it has not been used, it should not have been used on public right of way front elevations. And typically, there's been some leeway even on side elevations visible from the public right of way, but towards the back. But if not, the guidelines are very clear. When you're visible from the public right of way, which is a street, and you're walking by, it has to be wood. Alternate materials are not approved.
Okay, so it just has to be a wood-based material.
It has to be wood, not an alternate material. So not engineered wood, not LP Smart Side, not one of
Okay.
those. It has to be.
That's what I was gonna suggest. was
No, we-
So the only thing that is allowed on those specific houses is a true cedar plank board.
the nature, it's.
On the front
of the
elevation.
house.
Yes.
Or
In
the
the rear.
side, if it's.
You'll get a lot of sympathy.
Or like if it's a side and I walk and I can see it because there's, space between the neighbors and I'm walking and I can see the side, then that has to be wood. But then in
Okay.
some cases, like, a lot of the houses here, they have the main block and they have one addition and a secondary addition. We said, okay, the main block that's visible, that all has to be wood. And there's more leeway when you start moving down when it's further and not visible.
Okay, do you require that to be painted when it's, as soon as it's put up, or does it have to be like cedar? Is there?
No.
Do you have any kind of guideline you can give me so I know what I can put on the building?
Anything that's natural wood, it can be painted wood, it does not have to be like, a shingle or cedar, as long as it's appropriate for the exterior use. And it can be, some like to have not natural, some like to varnish, some like to have it painted.
Okay.
And HAC does not review colors, because that's considered something that's replaceable and renewable
Okay.
material.
What about style of siding? Like wood
No.
siding, I mean, they have horizontal now. Or
Yeah.
They want to go to like a vertical board and batten.
If they want to go vertical board and batten because they want to change, it depends if it's like a very classic building and suddenly go say, hey, I'm gonna be a farmstead, we may have to have a conversation about that because it's not relevant. But if they want to go in a different direction, as long as the material is the right material, and that can be a tier one review, that would not be a problem.
Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure when I go back to him, I can tell him
Yeah.
everything that would be an option. And then I guess I would have to submit again. And if you don't approve, we would have to. go-
Well, I had put in the review that if the material were to be wood, that would be an appropriate material. It's enough to just have, if you write an email to Marika, say we're amending the application, that's what it's gonna be, she files it in the folder. I can attach it and I can update the review and send it.
Okay,
So that can just be an update to the application.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
That's not something we have to vote on. It's just,
Yeah.
he's gonna amend it.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's not, he
Gotcha.
came to present the asking, so he's gonna,
Gotcha.
the minutes are gonna document, he's gonna amend it, and then that's it. Because the process is that when it gets denied, they can come to hack and. and
So
then-
if he gets the proper material, it could be then a tier one?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
because
So that's-
literally like to expedite things, I put in the comments that if it were wood, it would be appropriate, which allows Marika to say administratively comes back that I'm putting wood, she can document it, say, okay, you're good to go.
Okay, so next On the agenda, we have 106 West Sixth Street, which is another tier one application that was denied and is now here for review.
I'm Dean Mitchell, I'm the owner of the properties.
Before you start, and we want to hear from you, do you want to give us the reason for denial?
Yeah, it was submitted. It's also a contributing building. They want to install 8 windows on the side and on the back of the home. But the proposed windows are Fibrex, which is fiberglass. And the guidelines state, page 108, fiberglass replacement windows are not appropriate on elevations that are visible from the public right of way. So there's some, so we don't conform, like there's some on the side, those are gonna be visible and, should not be able to be installed. Fiberglass typically are windows that are not approved in the guidelines. And that are not, sort of don't meet the criteria, and I think you have the guidelines that you write. Kara. And the side windows, when you look at that particular property, I want to stick with, you look at the side, you can see it from the public right of way.
So that's the tier one review. This is the commission. We're not tier one, we're a different group. But let's hear from you.
Yeah, so my name is Dylan Griffith. I'm with Renewal by Anderson, which is the replacement division of Anderson. I understand with the word being Fibrex.
Now, are you representing Anderson or the?
I'm representing my client, Dean Mitchell,
Okay, very good.
also representing my company. I am the sales rep that sold the windows to Dean, yet to be reviewed. So the word Fibrex is a misconception. It's actually not fiberglass. It's wood composite. If you don't mind, I can bring you some papers real quick, just so that way you can get a visual reference of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So. As far as the Fibrex windows that we use, it's a wood composite. It mimics the true traditional style of a wood window. If you look on the first page, what I had circled was a mortise and tenon.
Just, I'm sorry, just one question, because I want to double check. This was a documentation that was put in with the application, which is an extrusion. Are you saying that these extrusions are wood composite?
Do you mind if I
Yeah.
take a look? So I believe that was Maggie with our. Yes, these are wood composite. That is a slope sill that we're looking at here.
Mhm. But these are extrusions. These are not like an engineered wood. If I'm talking about an engineered wood siding, it's like it's wood. And it's in the ash and it has the thickness and has the texture of this is a thin extruded product, except that you're saying that they're using as a binder in the very thin extrusions. They're using some wood material in there.
Can I grab the
Yeah.
sample? So we can pass that. That is the framework of the wood composite. So it's got the slope sill. It looks exactly like you would for a traditional 400 series Anderson wood window.
This is the exterior that I see.
Yes, actually, sorry, this is just showing, that we have color options. Dean's was white on both sides. This is actually the exterior. It would be white. Got a slope sill, just like a traditional wood window would. This would be the sash. This would be the exterior of the sash. This is what you would see from the road. It has the mortise and tenon joint that all wood windows have. From the outside perspective, there is zero difference between the two from a look standpoint. The benefit to the wood composite is it does not rot. It's got twice the life expectancy of a wood window, and we do not need to clad it with aluminum. A lot of the modern wood windows actually look less like a wood window than ours do.
What does ultraviolet do
Ultraviolet. So are you talking for
to
heat?
sunlight?
Yeah, so it actually holds up better.
I'm sorry.
So
go
it's
ahead.
actually been tested, and I can get you any type of material that you'd like on that. It actually holds up better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It holds up better than vinyl or wood products when it comes to the heat. That's how we get our life expectancy out of it, and it's double what you would find with wood or, vinyl. There's a misconception that since it's a composite, that it's vinyl. You know, this is a vinyl product right here. There's nothing like our window.
But I would also counter, just to counter that, I think a wood window that is well maintained and painted and kept is gonna last.
Yeah.
It, you know,
Yeah, and I mean, to the
it's why
point,
we have windows that are, hundreds of years old in the historic district.
this, and I mean, other than you say the fiberglass or the vinyl, the appearance, I mean, the fact that there's some wood binder in the extrusion, this is still an extruded, like when you look at the LP Smart side, for example, the idea is they can be routed, they're engineered wood, but they're in a binder and they're routed, literally like it can be cut to look like wood. Hardy plank is the same thing, it has the mass of wood. This is still an extruded, it looks very much with a high content of whatever it is that the matrix is holding it together. And so this is not a window that's appropriate for anything that's visible from the public right of way. It's a nice Fibrex window. It is, but
a
it's
beautiful
not
window.
appropriate for being
That's
visible
the
from the
question,
public
is
right
the
of way.
beauty in the window or the long lasting value in the window? I wish I had them myself.
But it's not,
Right,
it's
wood
not,
window.
it's clearly not wood.
I understand. I know that you also were just speaking to the fact of the backside of the home. And it's not gonna be street view. And also, this isn't on the true map of the historic, it's on the additional list of homes.
It,
That
is when the guidelines were updated, it's very clear, the purview of PAC goes to the
I
local
understand.
district, which was the original one. And the National Historic Landmark District, which has some of those teeth that go on either side of six. So
I
it is-
understand.
It is under the purview.
So if you switch to the final page on there, can you, either of you guys ever tell me a difference between those windows? Two windows listed on the back page I just handed out.
If the point was to make a context about appearance of which is wood, things would be very simple and everything would be artificial. If somebody said, I have a jewel, the diamond really looks the same, or the gold looks really same, the thing is the texture. Wood actually is a natural material that has granularity to it, that has texture. Unless you're painting it with like a serious thick amount of paint, it's not gonna have all this very regular consistency. And that's what the beauty of the historic district is that you walk through it and you can feel the texture of the finishes. And by the way, that's part of the fabric of the historic district. That's why, masonry walls and things of that nature. So anything that's visible and you have, a lot of that front of the property is visible from the public right of way. Whether at some point the guidelines get updated to include, different types of, not for the public right of way, not for the front, but for the back, like to extend or contract the definition of fiberglass. That's something that's different, but
So-
these are not appropriate for the.
Okay.
public
And
size.
one of the
Or if we can-
reasons we have those guidelines too is because windows are such an important design element
Yeah.
of these homes. I mean, because they take up a large portion of them. They are a key.
They're character defining
They're
features. When you look at a historic building, if you think that's gonna be contributing, you look at the character defining features, and those are gonna be, particularly since we're looking at the exterior, it's gonna be the elevation, the scale, the envelope, the openings, the doors, the windows.
Okay, question for you. So right now, is it process for you guys to approve a wood clad window?
Wood clad is not a wood window on a front elevation. We just had that conversation. When people say I'm putting a wood clad window, my question you, the simple shortcut is like, what do I see from the outside?
Yeah,
If I have a wood clad window, the applicant would see wood inside because that's what they want. They don't want to see the
I was
aluminum, but on the
just
outside, yeah.
asking because of the fact that I've seen a ton that are wood clad that are
They-
installed there. And from my perspective, having the mortise and tenon joints in a way that ours looks, actually looks more like a wood window than some of the ones I've seen.
Wood clad on the public right of way is not appropriate, and aluminum clad on public right of way, not appropriate, visible from public right of way, not appropriate. On elevations that are not visible from the public right of way, that has been entertained and approved. Now, the fact that some people in the past or at a different time did something visible from the public right of way, that. I don't recommend approving it, but that does not justify approving something not appropriate on it.
Understood. So all the ones that are facing the rear of the home though, because a lot of these ones that are proposed are on the rear of the home, are they okay? And
For now,
mine,
fiberglass, things that are fibrous and defined as fiberglass are not appropriate. We may have to.
we're not
revisit.
fiberglass.
I know. I mean, we can talk about that.
Things
definition.
classified as fiberglass. in
It's
this
not
table,
fiberglass.
Things classified for hack purposes at this table as fiberglass are considered fiberglass.
No, but
We're not arguing chemistry or construction.
different
We're
matrix
talking about
within.
an understanding of the construct and the materials.
So composite, you're saying instead of fiberglass, I could agree with that. But like fiberglass is a completely different material than what I'm proposing. They make fiberglass windows. They look nothing like wood windows. They look like a vinyl window.
Well, most of the windows, except for the profile, don't really, you come and look at it close and it's not gonna look. Now, if you're talking about sight lines that are miles away, you can have some replicas that are aluminum, that are steel, you can replicate sight lines and profiles, that kind of thing you can do. I think, but for now, this is just a material that is not one that is approvable based on the guidelines as they stand. We've always talked about the guidelines being a living document as materials change and improve, but that for now, we have to work on the framework that we have. On the other hand, other alternate materials such as, aluminum clad on the rear elevations, that can be entertained, things of that nature.
Okay, so then if I got a new proposal that was just for the rear of this home, would I be able to submit that just for the rear side of the home then?
Are we talking aluminum clad?
No, we would be talking that, the wood composite.
Firebricks is still, it's still considered within the same family. It's just that the binder is not fiberglass, it's the binder is, and I know that they're improved and I'm sure they're better than what they used to be, but they're still within the same family, to Kevin's point, of how they were defined.
But I just heard you guys saying that, on the rear of the home for, the different type of sidings, and that's okay. But like,
It's
why
okay,
can't we make
certain
rear
materials and the guidelines, literally, if you look at the page of the guidelines, the fiberglass and that family replacement windows were specifically determined as not being appropriate.
siding?
So
How many vinyl windows you have on that
now,
street?
one of the things,
Including his.
one
In
of
front
the
of the
things,
same as vinyl windows.
yes, and they are not appropriate. If they were to come today, they would not be
Yeah,
approved.
so
But
if
one
you
of the
were-
things, yeah. Go ahead, because
Just my point was, if you were to come today to present a change of those windows, if you wanted to install new windows in the front, you could not replace them with vinyl.
Okay,
now there's one thing, because I don't want to be, if you could just double check one thing for me on page 108 for the fiberglass windows, because I don't want to misspeak. On the rear elevations, are they potentially acceptable? Because I know at some point they had been declared to be not, but are we, because I was quoting that they were not appropriate on elevations visible from the public right of way, which mean that the rear elevations would be acceptable, but I'm wondering, was that correct? And for once, I didn't bring the whole guidelines with me, which in case if it is okay on areas not visible from the public right of way, it could be done, you just have to modify the application, it can be done administratively, you wouldn't have to go through the whole
Okay.
process again. But I just need to double check on that, and I'll obviously double check on my guidelines.
okay,
Because then sometimes we had excluded, like vinyl is included anywhere. Front, side, rear, but I'm seeming to remember that I think fiberglass may have been excluded just on ones visible from the public right of way.
Fiberglass replacement windows are not appropriate on elevations that are visible from the right of way.
Okay, that's what I thought, so that's what I put here, which means that on the back where they're not visible, and I double check, if they're not, then they would be acceptable there.
It's second story with about a 40 foot offset from Deemer Place.
Yeah, on the back.
On the
Yeah,
back.
yeah, so I think that's my understanding, that would not, so the side would not, but those could. So I think based on that, this could be a modified application if you were to put in writing or just send it, then that could be
okay,
for the back, for the side, you'd still have to.
okay. Understood. And then, these, documents that you're looking through that go over the guidelines, are these available to the public?
Yeah,
Am I able to get my?
They're online.
Okay, yeah, I don't work with the permit side of things, so like, I really have limited experience. I just came on behalf of my client because we've done half of his windows already. I feel horrible. They didn't get pulled up, I guess, on the first 2 runs years back, so now it's just a matter of like, I've already wrote up, we followed the proper channels, and then, we were told to come in today, so on his behalf, I figured I'd show up and try to do as much as possible.
You haven't installed any windows, right? On
Not
the
right
sides?
now, no,
Okay,
no, this is.
In the past, he has.
In the
in the
past,
past, okay, because we've had done all those windows, I was like, from
no,
it's like.
no,
okay.
it was in
Doing
the
your
past.
job, you know your product, you're very effective in conveying the benefits of the product.
Yes,
This town is nearly 400 years
I know.
old. They don't make any new old towns, and we're very, very protective of what changes we allow to it. We all hate our wood windows that have to be repainted all the time. We all hate to replace our siding, which I just recently taken down 4 It's hard to live in this short.
Okay,
That's the best thing.
understood.
It's not for everybody.
I understand.
I'm curious about the classification
It was
of
vinyl.
the story, if I might.
Sure.
I bought the house in '86 and we did all vinyl windows then with no problems at that point.
Yeah.
We did a retake the second time that Anderson came out with 90.
And then there's.
And the irony is what we're talking about is our bedroom windows, which are wooden Anderson windows, which are rotting and these strings are breaking. We don't want to live in this house forever. We're trying to prepare to sell. and move
So you
to
should be
smaller
good for the
properties.
back with these.
We're replacing these windows with old wooden,
Why
rotted.
why don't you, okay, if you're finished, why don't you step up
Okay.
to the podium
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna-
you'll get a full hearing, because I think these are, you have valid questions.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking for the fluidity of am I historic or not, because I've never known, and my neighbor and I argue this all the time. He lives in the Sears manufactured house next to me on Sixth Street. He has always claimed that he is historic and I'm not. I'm out of the loop as far as pure historic, and every map I've seen, he's right. Everything I've seen excludes my property. The only property that's historic on West Sixth Street is the Sears house, which is 108 West Sixth Street.
Your home is included in the historic buildings database.
When
That we
was it established as historic? It wasn't in 86 when we bought it.
Well, the National Historic Landmark District Survey was done, I believe, in 86, 87.
It was, yes.
And they literally went house by house and determined which ones were and which ones were not deemed historic. And that was based on the year of construction and how many of the features were still there. And what we did, I believe it was 2016 or 2017, well, when the guidelines were updated, it was noticed that the local historic district had limits that excluded a lot of properties that were on the National Historic Register or on the national, and that had a lot of, so it became, if you're gonna do that, overlaid both maps and half the purview was extended to anything that was on the National Historic Register, because that's part of what makes, Newcastle so significant. And recently, like, well, now it's 5 years ago, still pre-COVID, we went and did a survey and it was 587 properties. And we went and reviewed all of them and determined whether they still remain contributing or whether there've been so many changes since the 1980s that, they were no longer contributing. Some just weren't there anymore. Some were new construction, so they're not contributing. Now, if you're non-contributing, that still doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, but there's more leeway. But for example, you can't do vinyl windows, you can do cladding, so different. So that's it. It's because it was deemed, it was on the National Historic Landmark District when they did the survey. And that's just purely based on the value of the property, what, it's historic and what it means to the neighborhood. So that's kind of where that.
We may have different personal opinions about what should and should not be in. And I don't think any of us at the table, maybe. Our architect has, but we're asked about expanding it or not. But it is the district that we have purview over. We'd rather not have purview over your house, frankly.
I'd rather you not.
But we do.
I agree with you 100%.
And until those
Perception
things.
is an amazing thing, we're more concerned about perception than we are.
No, there is the nature of the town, which once lost, we become, nothing wrong with Ellesmere, it's a lovely town, nothing wrong with Smyrna, it's a lovely town. But whatever Ellesmere and Smyrna were 100 years ago has been completely lost. We try to find a balance between effective use of money and respecting the property owner's rights, as well as the community belief that we have a special place to live. And it's not an easy balance. We actually struggle before we make our
No, I
vote.
sense your perspective on that.
And I
situation.
think-
I understand,
It's,
but I want you to know the irony is, and I think I made it clear with you, I said, the phone call, the most recent, this is the third time Anderson has been out. The most recent time, I think, before this was like 2012 or 13. I assume they went through this format and there wasn't any problem, so.
different, I can only, well, one, the guy
Let me
was.
finish my statement before you respond to my.
No, go
My,
ahead,
my
sure.
question is to you, so something changed between his last time here and this time here, maybe what he was putting in, not able to put in this time. Why weren't we aware of that? Why weren't we informed of the fact that, I think the identification of our house to become historic must have evolved in the last 10 years.
No, the National Historic Landmark District, that can be done, it can be provided as a nomination, and I think that's what people don't realize. Newcastle is not a local or state historic landmark, it's a national historic landmark, right? So nationwide, it's within those few historic districts that retain so much integrity. That was done in the 1980s.
So we bought the house historic, you're saying, in 86 when we bought the house.
I don't know if it's 86 or 87, if you had bought, I mean, your house, let me qualify. Your house has already been, this is what I do, your house has always been historic. 1830, all those years, it's a historic building. the listing, the fact that it's listed within the boundaries of the National Historic Landmark District is what makes it a contributing building to the character of the National Historic Landmark District. So that's what triggers, if you're in the local historic district, or if you're listed on the National Register, there's one house, the one that cements are that's out actually of the district, but it's individually listed. That means it's under the purview of the Historic Area Commission. So that's one aspect. The other side is, I can't speak to the past, that the guidelines have always been fairly consistent. This update to the guidelines was done in 2016. There were public meetings.
But the National Archives.
No, the guidelines, the design guidelines update, all these standards.
And the
were-
changes were made by you guys or by the feds?
The changes to the guidelines.
Yes.
They were done locally. I did the work, working not only with the Historic Area Commission, but with the historic. There was a HARC, which was a Historic Area Review Committee. There were members there from Newcastle. There were people who were local residents, people from the business community, there were a group of 5 people from the historical, the Historical Association. There were public meetings. We had vast public meetings with public input. There were 3 meetings. It was, the proposed changes were discussed also in front of City Council. They were reviewed because it required a change to the ordinance. So all of that was done in a very public fashion with a lot of public meetings and a lot of discussions. That's actually when it was decided that, ultimately the architect was not a voting member anymore. I am now, but that was all done with a lot of public input, public feedback, independent, which is why we came to alternate materials and approving them in some areas. So that was done very publicly about, 5 or 6 years ago, or a little bit more. And that's why it's all available. And then on the city website, then there was the addition, which was the graphic guidelines to kind of explain, and then the updated survey to make sure that the buildings that were, because if the building had been changed so much, there was no reason to leave it. And, put those constraints, I think there were a couple that switched from being contributing to non-contributing. That's been a very open and public process.
We were trying to complete the upstairs, and the other 3 windows besides the 5 in the master bedroom are facing Jeff Llewellyn's property on the 2nd tier
Yes,
with trees over the front of our house and side of our house. Would they be approved if he modifies his?
the ones on the back, yes, if he comes and
Yeah,
sits.
the 5 bedroom windows, and then there's a bathroom window and 2 adjoining windows from a guest bedroom that are facing the Llewellyn property, 108 West 6th Street, with trees.
I mean, trees.
No one can see them.
It all depends. I mean, we can look at how far back they are, but if I walk and I can see them, because trees can be there and trees disappear. So if one walks and can see them and then their view shed, and because you have a fairly wide, wide gap, they're visible. The back is kind of a no question.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Okay, is it possible to set up a time for maybe you guys to look at these? Because the 3 windows he's talking about on the side are on the rear of the house. They aren't.
Yeah,
towards the
like,
front of the
If they're towards the back and if they're hidden, I can set a time. I mean, if that's a tier 1, that's something where I can come make a determination with Jeff to look at the ones that could be potentially iffy.
Okay.
But if I'm standing on the sidewalk and I can see them, that's just gonna be a clear definition. So if you'd want us to meet, I'm happy to come and we set a time. You can get my contact info from Marika, or if I have a business card here, I can give it to you.
And everyone denied tier 1 has a right to come to the commission and state their case, and some people get approval, and some people don't. It all depends on the case and the house and the circumstances.
Okay.
And the
understood.
guidelines.
And if you don't mind, then if I can collect your information.
Yeah, so I'll see if I have a card. If not, Marika will definitely give you my contact info.
Or I'll call you. Sorry about that.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah. I may not have a business card here, but if you reach out, or if you have.
Yeah, I will, I'm assuming Maggie, the. person-
Marika, reach out to her. She'll give you my contact info.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have a consultation for 105 The Strand. This is in the bill. And Mr. Pennell. To come forward.
First, I'd just like to say thank you for demonstrating me tonight with this discussion of windows, etc. This place is serious about history. And that is precisely why my wife, Kathy Curran, and I are hoping to move down to a new house on the Strand. We Just briefly on our background, we're in Connecticut now in a 1799 house. The rear L is actually older than that. The small town in Haddam, Connecticut was frankly going to hell in a handcart because of the Planning and Zoning Commission approving all kinds of things, historic tear downs. So it's really, it's tragic, but that is a negative incentive that is pushing us down this direction. And just a little bit more about how we come to know this place. Kathy is just retired from Trinity College, Hartford, after 34 years teaching the history of architecture and urbanism. She got her doctorate from University of Delaware. And that's when she was invited back, I'll brag on her behalf. She is an eminent American architectural historian. She published the definitive book on the origins of the American Art Museum, which was published by Getty. That's a pretty good cred. When she was invited back for a symposium on the 50th anniversary of the Delaware Art History program to speak, we made a side tour over here. She said, I remember this historic town. Why don't we come take a look? And we fell in love with it. First looked at old houses to see about buying and renovating. I'm an architect and planner. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a second. And then we lucked into 3 years ago, just as COVID was coming on, Chris Cashman told us about 105 The Strand. And we said, nothing better is going to come along. So we grabbed that and have been working steadily towards what we hope will be construction late this year, early next, and selling, sadly, our 1799 house. For my own part, my own checkered career, I'm an architect and planner and writer. I've had my own practice since I started it in DC in 1978, and have done a fair amount of. Marika put my one-page clear bio in the file, so you'll probably seen this, and I won't go over it. I've done a lot of work in historic areas, on historic buildings. I was one of the guys who saved Fenway Park from getting knocked down, which I consider to be a nice preservation move. I've built social, actually mixed income housing in an historic district of Amsterdam. History is really important. Oh, and don't hold it against me. I'm a Yale, and I wrote the what's regarded as the definitive history of the campus in its place in New Haven and buildings. This is about to go into its third edition since first publication in 1999. Now, Marika said she was going to put the 30 image slide file that I sent down in the folder. So especially hearing the level of conversation already present tonight, I wonder, let me just give you a choice, since I'm basically here to hear from you guys and get direction for the next steps. Rather than plod through those 30 slides, let me offer as an alternative to talk about, since I know there's been some interest in windows, and I included some material on the variety of windows we're proposing to use for the front and the side of the design for 105 The Strand. And then maybe talk something about what Marika relayed. There was some interest in the setback arrangements. So I did a more detailed set of plans at 8th inch and 16th inch of what I would politely call the syncopated arrangement of lot widths, setbacks, etc. And the logic that we have come to in terms of what we're proposing to do for 105. Or again, I'm just basically here to hear comments and hope to cycle them into the what I hope will be the next round of working towards construction drawings, formal application for building permit, and then make a formal application here with the final design for the house. You've, I hope, been able to look at the screenshots of I have a fairly extensive 3D computer model, which Marika didn't know whether there was a slide projector here, so I was going to bring one down, but for complicated reasons, I had to come down by train rather than drive down. So I schlepped out from Terry House with my stuff, and I've got the 3D model. I could do a fly around if you're at all interested on the computer here, but please just tell me what would be helpful to your consideration, or what do you think would be helpful to us for the next go round.
You want to get questions, Trace?
I looked at your package, your ideas, and I'm intrigued, especially now after finding out that you have a checkered career as an architect. When an architect designs their own home, what are they looking? This relates nothing to our approval of anything. I'm just asking a question, if you don't mind sharing.
Oh, boy, did you get me started with that? I happen to have been the first non-Taliesin Associates researcher allowed into the Frank Lloyd Wright archives ever, actually since the 1930s. And I wrote what seems to be regarded as a definitive research article on the early career of Frank Lloyd Wright, including his own house designs. And the very curious thing that happens again and again with Wright in terms of his own house. There's a wonderful 1889 house in Oak Park, Illinois, which was falling down when I first saw it in the late 1970s, right after getting out of architecture school. And since then, the Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio Foundation has been formed. It has become not only a kind of historic preservation mindedness center for Oak Park, but it's become the center of very large tourism industry. Back to immediately to your question, Wright's 1889 house was something called a four-square plan, which was because there were basically 4 rooms on the entryway, living room, dining room, kitchen on the ground floor. And he reused that 4-square plan as the core of Taliesin, his Wisconsin home, built in the 1930s, but it had begun to sort of spiral out. And to that 1889 house in 1898, he added his studio, his home studio building. The studio added onto the house. You'll see why this is all going to wind back to a direct answer to your question. Is 2 octagons, a larger one, which was the drafting room, and smaller one, smaller octagon, which is a library. In the design of the Guggenheim Museum, which happened between the late 1940s and its completion just before Wright's death in 1959, if you look at the design of the Guggenheim Museum, it's his own home and studio. But the octagons have been swapped for spirals, and it's been flipped. So the direct answer to your question is that Frank Lloyd Wright's homes were all his buildings. And he repeated, that I wrote about this, that there's something that called the typology of houses. And he basically spun out a typology of houses which were for his clients and for himself from that one basic four-square plan. So Wright's houses were all his houses. That's why he felt comfortable walking in and rearranging the furniture and saying, if it leaks, move the table, you know? So that's, I'm sorry, you hit a button there. Wright is an amazing guy. I'll tell a very brief Frank Lloyd Wright story, which I heard from my teacher, Vincent Scully, great Yale architectural historian. It was the reason I went to architecture school. Frank Lloyd Wright was visiting a young architect, and Scully was with. And we heard this happen, and the young architect made the mistake of saying, "Well, Mr. Wright, since you're in town, would you like to see my new building?" And Wright, and the young architect, Wright went along with it and went on the tour. And at the end of the tour, the young architect asked, according to Scully, asked Wright, "Well, Mr. Wright, what do you think of my new building?" And Wright's reply was, "Well, son, we all do God's work, you in your way and I in his." So what I love about that is that the turn on a dime from apparent humility to utter arrogance. You know, I speak with the Lord as an inspiration for my architecture. Sorry. I'm too long-winded.
Okay. I really appreciate I appreciate that you included elements from the design guidelines in your presentation.
From the,
The design guilines in
Oh,
your
yeah.
presentation.
yeah, and there's a
Appreciate
lot,
that you read
there's
them.
a lot that you said for those, and the ones that I did not include on rhythms, etc., really form the basis of the kind of complicated way that I've developed to deal with what I call the syncopation of the lot widths. The presence, one of the common bonds is, despite the different lot widths and house widths, is the occurrence of triplets of windows. So even though we've got the widest lot, 40 feet wide, and could have 4 windows on the front, you just got 3, so that it repeats the rhythm on the street. That's not unconscious. On the side, the top and bottom, on that fourth interval, there are bathrooms up and down the plumbing stack. So the double hung windows, or those, are on the side, and they're the same. But what you're proposing to use is something, it's a relatively new product from Pella, it's called the Pella Magnum. It's a real wood window available in different woods. And Pella developed it in collaboration with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So it's really been vetted, to say the least. I used it, quick little bit of background. I've served for 20 years on the board of Connecticut Landmarks, which owns 12 historic houses around the state, the most famous of which is the Nathan Hale Homestead in Coventry, Connecticut. I oversaw the renovations of a variety of those houses. One of them was something that was finished up about 2 years ago called Forge Farm, which is in North Stonington, Connecticut, which is a historic district close to the coast. And the house 4 is about 1750. It was the first use of these Pella Magnum windows in Connecticut and maybe New York too. I'm not sure on that. I remember conversations with the Pella dealers in Connecticut and New York about that. They're very, very interesting windows. And I included pictures, both close up And one of their advantages, besides being extremely well made, is that they have an internal screen very cleverly concealed in the lower sash. So you don't have to muck up the windows with bug screens. Just when you put up the window, the screen encloses, and then it's in a metal channel inside the wood. So it saves that layer of worry about insects, and you can throw the windows wide open and maintain the historic integrity and keep the bugs out.
And they're sort of, they're solid wood that's kind of dipped and infused in this formula, right?
Yes,
Sort of like the version, I mean, now currently the latest thing is the acetylated wood, you know, which you, that
Yes,
just kind of
exactly.
last forever and
What's the word?
acetylated.
acetylated, that's a different,
It's
it's
a
maybe a different version.
Without getting complicated, it's a variety of plastic vinegar. So it really discourages mold.
Like acetyl, ACETYL?
Yeah,
Acetyl.
acetyl, yeah. And I mean, it's, they,
ACETY.
you can, you know, it's wood, it's just, it's been treated and sort of like soaked in it, and then it's, and it has this incredibly resistive, I mean, it's not inexpensive, but it has this incredibly resistive. They use it I mean, in Europe, of course, they're
Do
wearing it
you
on certain
paint
uses.
over it, or you leave
You
it?
can paint over it, yeah.
It's just kind of, but it's the next generation of trying to come up with solutions that are not artificial wood or engineered. I mean, there's a portion of engineering in terms of the developing the product in which they are, you know, that's why they say like, you know, it's treated.
Yeah,
wood.
that's why I included the spec page.
Yeah.
Quite
So it's a wood
deliberately.
preservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the next generation, the assimilated wood, that's kind of like that they actually use that wood, they use it in some of the canals, and it's there, and it kind of, it has incredible properties, and it can be routed and cut, and looks pretty much and acts like wood.
Is that
Not
substantially,
looks actual wood.
substantially more costly than a straight wood window?
Currently, the assimilated is definitely.
It
more costly,
definitely
and this
is.
Probably the reserve is probably.
Because we were pioneering for Pella and they're intending to use it for advertising, we got a break on the Forge Farm windows. I'm hoping I might get,
These are those.
yeah, those, exactly. Those are the historic windows. It's an amazing property. It's one of our two properties that has tenants in it. So the upshot of that is that we really wanted to make sure that sliding these things up and down was durable. And they've held up nicely.
Civil warranty.
Yes, it's at least a year because that's legally required, but I can find that out. I've got good relations with Pella, and I think you know, who knows, I might be able to get a break for our house. You know, to be able to boast of
Yeah, because they.
building in historic Newcastle has gotta be a kind
If I remember correctly, come factory primed exterior, you can get the like.
I
factory
understand there's no assurance it will be approved. It's
Sure.
just a matter for discussion. It's very lively debate, and I think it's fascinating.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes you want to do a parallel, though it's not the same in terms of quality, definitely not the same in terms of the chemical involved, but you know, if you're using pressure treated wood. It is wood, but it's pressure treated wood in order to make it more resistant for underground uses and things like that. But different category in terms of the health and the concerns, and the chemicals and the reactivities. But it's still wood, it's just, you know, the treatment and the later source, so I think this is more of that type of family, as opposed to saying. We take wood sawdust, we put it in a matrix, and then we extrude it, that's kind of a different creature, because that's literally engineered wood.
To just add a little bit, the intention for the front porch that you see on the design is that's wood. Those are, and for what it's worth, it's Corinthian proportions on the columns 1:9, so they're square, and the entablature to column height is precisely the academic 1:4. I taught the history of architectural theory at Yale for 2 decades, so I kind of know that stuff by heart.
So. I mean, do you want to keep on asking questions? Well, I just had a couple questions. So
I
go ahead.
think more, the comment, I guess just what I thought looking at this is it's a beautiful design. I feel like my eye looking at this, I want to see a 4-bay almost.
Yeah.
I understand the continuity, you're trying to keep it continuous, but there are some 4-bay
Oh, yeah.
houses in Newcastle. There aren't many,
There are.
but on East Second Street, you see one. There's the back Reed House, garden wall, and then there's an alley, and then that first townhome in a series of 3. It's a 4-bay attached to 2 3-bays.
And, yeah, no, I mean, because, I mean, that was the first thing when we were gonna talk architecture about certain, and we don't, you know, we don't design by committee here, but, and then you pointed out the windows, and I was like, so. Yeah, I mean, go ahead if you want, but that's definitely something that.
Sure, the only thing I was going to mention, there's another 4-bay on Delaware Street. I think it's 110 Delaware Street. That's more where my comment ended. It's just.
Do you have any questions?
No, yeah, same thing.
Because I was gonna say, like, I mean, obviously, this is a very, very comprehensive application, so thank you so much, and the inclusion of and glad to hear that the guidelines, at least the graphics supplement kind of helped. I was, at one point, I first started, got confused, because like, there are how many homes, and then I was looking at the site and like, was I missing one more home? But I realized,
The flowers next door have just about finished there.
Right.
yeah,
That was
and
mine.
that's where I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is what we're looking at. So I think just just general questions. In terms of, now your intent is to have the front porch and then you're gonna have the brick piers. Is that,
There are brick piers behind the wood.
so have a wood skirt?
No, yes, on the immediate street front.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, and
Yes.
I understand the limitations, it's a great model, you
Yeah,
can't go to.
there's a brick base for each of the
Mhm.
piers, but then it's wood above that.
Yeah.
And then brick.
I figured, modeling is great to a certain point, but it's not gonna show absolutely everything. I think just generally in the big picture, I mean, I think. I was looking at the back, you seem to be more or less aligning, that's why we always, and ultimately we don't always do need a site plan, because TAC actually approves siting of the building, which is why you need a full-blown, plot plan. They seem more or less to be aligning. This rear, is that, the rear portion, is that gonna be a 1-story open porch, or is that like a glazed-in porch?
That's a screen porch.
Okay, so it's
And,
just,
speaking of windows, there's a new variety, actually 2 companies make themselves fold up double hung windows.
Mhm.
So in addition to moving up and down, you can pivot them so that they're up against the
Yeah.
ceiling. So what we're hoping to do is a 3-season room, which mostly is a screen porch,
Mhm.
but then install those windows. But again, they're on the rear.
But I would primarily read is that, and it kind of aligns with, because we always look at the proportion of the depth. I think when it comes to the house, what are you thinking for the materials for the side elevations?
Wood siding, don't know for sure yet. I'm partial. I think a lot about sun angles. And one of the really cool things about historic Newcastle is the cocking of the grid. The strand is at a 41-degree angle, northeast, or east-northeast of the compass. What that means is that the morning sun really hits the river side, but then in the afternoon, it swings around and actually lights the street side of the strand. That's one of the reasons that we're trying to do the porch on the front side, because so many people enjoy walking along the strand with their dogs in the evening. And again, not to get off on a tangent, but I helped found what's come to be called New Urbanism in the early 1980s. I worked on Seaside, Florida, ... And one of the things that we brought back is the idea of using the front porch instead of the rear deck as a kind of, it became a kind of emblem of social solidarity and not leading a separate life in your house. Anyway, to the question of the siding, there is a history of what's called German drop siding in the area. I like that. It's a lap siding, but the upper part below the lap is slightly concave, and that catches a highlight. So it helps facades not die when you can catch just a little bit of a glisten in things. It's not so much that it holds water, it's concave, so the water runs off, but that would be my first inclination for the horizontal siding on the sides.
And then, so there is methods, I'm kind of working my way to different elements. Then you have the element that's the one that's adjacent, that seems to be sort of like a tower. It's like a rectangle, that now, is that
That's
meant
an
to be?
elevator.
So is the elevator meant to be flat roof?
Uh,
But that's how it's looking in the model.
It's, I was thinking about putting a copper top, essentially flat, but enough of a pitch, because verdigris is an attractive historic color and material. I also wanted to make sure to really have only a slight architectural protuberance above the 35-foot height limitation. Other than that, we're below the 35-foot.
Yeah, it's just that square 35-foot flat roofed towers are not a typical. It's big for a chimney, and a chimney would have a different profile. I mean, as I said, we're not, and after what you have done, after these conversations, I am more than happy to meet with you, to talk about ideas, to run through a few things, to come up with a design, but I think that is something that if you look at it, particularly as a coming, is something that's just gonna be pretty striking when somebody looks, and so I think that's one where I'd perhaps revisit.
You have an off the top of your head suggestion about, I mean, I'm open to cant of any sort.
I think so. I mean, just looking at it, maybe revisiting it. I try, as I said, particularly in your case, as an architect to another architect, being respectful of the design intent and the vision. I'm not dictating a favored approach. I'm saying, let's think about if there's some way that we can express it or reach your goal a little bit differently. It could be a position, it could be.
The really clear and obvious thing is, it's very close to the center line of the ridge.
Mhm.
So if
Moving it, yeah,
moving it slightly and then incorporating the ridge line.
yes, because then, yeah,
so
because then it
that
becomes,
it merges seamlessly with the.
exactly, that is something
Okay,
that would work.
I'll change that.
And then the other thing, I mean, we revisit, I'll have to double check the guidelines, what they say about skylights on street facing elevations, but I think more importantly, there is the fact that, well, I mean, there are two elements of like the front elevation. The first one is, yes, it is very atypical in Newcastle to have a blank bay.
Mhm.
You always, if there's a bay, there's an opening, there's a window, so when I look at it, it reads, particularly with the porch, it reads like a 4-bay. Where somebody took one of the bays and, and it's happened, blocked it up or something like that. So I think when I was reviewing it, I looked at it, I was like, why don't we have a window? And I saw that you have the bathroom and things like that. I think I would encourage you to see how it work with your model if you want to read it that way. I don't know if it might be, and this is just me throwing this out, thinking about it as we're talking. It's almost if you were to break out the front elevation and have it sort of recess as if it was like a different step, and then you would put that blank bay a little bit further back. I know it eats into your footprint, right? So that's not what you want to do. But I would say if you're going to keep it there, it reads if something's missing, because there's something that's not balanced. In a whole elevation that's very balanced, you have a blank elevation in that bay of brick. That's kind of, and if I say jarring, I don't mean it in a negative pejorative way. I mean, it's something that looks as if something's missing in the balance, because it's a very balanced elevation. So the other potential is to say, I'm going to read as a 3-bay, and I can try to read as a 3-bay that potentially at some point had an extra bay added to it, so it steps back. And that makes a dynamic of hierarchy that allows you to read that not as, oh, I'm an equal that was treated differently, but I'm secondary in my hierarchy, so thus I don't have any openings.
Let me ask the alternative way of getting something of the same effect would be to just have the porch be across the width of the 3-bay.
That could potentially work. Be interesting to see how that
Then it
dynamic
could
works.
stay at the same plane, which is the plane of the other 3,
Mhm.
the houses to the right as seen from the street.
It will be your home. You have your
But-
own mind. You give your own interpretation. then we can argue about it later on. But-
Well, I think what you're
Okay,
trying,
and you've given it thought. You may want to give more. You may want to say, I haven't.
I
think
think
it
what you're
looks- I think it looks
describing,
distinctive and cute,
but I
okay?
think what you're.
It's a matter of,
No, it's not just,
Personal use.
it's not, it's a matter of fitting, and I think to your point, if you stop the porch on those first three, because if you're stopping the porch, would you be sort of recessing that portion? You have to, right, to make it a 3-bay porch, because your first floor goes over your porch.
There could be,
Your second floor, sorry.
I take it back, that would expose a pier. Which is covered up right now, and I want to cover that pier with.
casual changes can lead to unseen consequences when.
Well,
a
I mean,
certain
well,
Template has been
Let
followed.
me just promise to study.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because we don't
If there are
design,
a variety of,
design,
you know,
yeah.
one obvious option, there are many cases of brick recesses that are the same pattern as the.
But that have a depth that potentially.
They have a
can be-
depth,
Yeah,
that's right.
it's a question of reading, because you are new construction. The other thing is, to your point, you can also have like a partial, you can have porches that sometimes they come as a pent roof, but then to the back, they can get larger if you're recessing a portion. These are all ideas. The consultations are meant for that, and then we do have a framework by which we can have work sessions where you come to hack with a guide, with a design that is your design. I'm just there to say, to give an opinion like whether would fly or not. If it's constructive and it helps, that's fine. If it's something that you don't, there is no obligation. The goal of this consultation is ultimately to come to hack and to say, hey, this is the concept. I've discussed it. I can thoroughly say yes. If there's an issue where you want to come and we think differently, I would say that. But that allows us, when you come to hack, we've had this consultation and hopefully we come. So I think I would revisit that. The other thing is you have from the street under the side porch and access to your basement,
The,
that's there down there?
of course, I realize that goes to the building permit
Mhm.
issues. Here's the site issue that is connected to all that. The flowers were at 107, immediately adjacent to us. Their sidewall is right at the property line. We don't know yet what's going to happen with 111. It's the other 40-foot wide lot further to the left. There is not space enough between 101 and Pavan and Goban Shahal's house at 103 to get anything back between. There, as I'm drawing it now, the same condition of 2-foot setback, 2-foot setback is not at 4 feet wide enough to get any kind of, let's start with the simple stuff. Lawn cutting back. So our intention is to have the 12-foot setback from the flowers on the street, narrow that to 6 feet, which is still wide enough to get a tractor, even a light. And unless we think about the maintenance, we're intending to give the flowers and the Chahals a free, right away. So they'll have use of our stuff to get lawn mowing equipment, and they just had a guy in cutting the weeds along the shoreline, and I'm hoping to get permission to put in a small basement at the front. That the stairs are
Yeah, 'cause-
visible, the stairs are visible right there, so that I can have things not in the house like a chainsaw. I'm pretty good with a chainsaw. And while I don't do carving with it, the amount of detritus that washes up along that shore is such that I want to be able to occasionally to take a chainsaw to something. So, and I would hope to have a place to store equipment of that sort in the basement where it's readily accessible, not only to take back for maintenance in the rear. But, to, you know, get it out and do, no.
But I think,
That's the
yeah,
flowers
so-
right there. That's the flowers.
I
house,
believe
right?
that's what he said. I think that that's where this is a sort of a bit of an awkward articulation because you're coming along, you have a continuity of the brick, then suddenly you're going in a recess and you know, almost like a subway, so going in, you're going in the back, you're going down the stairs, which you have, and you have your porch railing that's sort of coming like it's under the over.
It's under
so-
the overhang, yeah, there's a porch rail, which is not separate a porch from the.
Yeah, and it's an atypical scene, it's kind of like it's carving in something under the building, which with the brick and everything like that is. It has an awkwardness to it that I'm not sure would work with the rhythm of the street. So that's something that I think we should
thought
talk
about
about
that,
and
and,
see how it could be this.
These are just open-ended discussions. These are not a series of requirements put before you or mandates or hurdles you have to jump. It's just a discussion. Now, the key is that you have a home that you're happy with. Okay, that's not offensive to
And
the sense,
contributes.
that is not offensive to the sensibilities of the commission.
Mhm,
Because we do worry much about this town
clearly.
and also be respectful of the fact that that lot was open for, I think, since the Dutch were here. And you're gonna occupy it forever now with your home, so, and I think
Yeah,
you are
it's
being
a big
respectful. of what-
responsibility. That I know
Certainly
very
is.
well that the reason for the 600-foot depth is that Latrobe, of the lots, is that Latrobe intended those to be wharves. They were gonna be part of the shipping industry, and that's all early 19th century fill. So I believe me, I'm thinking about that in terms of the footings on this.
Yes, I mean, I think that's kind of, if those were the elements, I think revisiting the elevator, what I'm calling the elevator shaft. I think definitely,
That's easy.
looking at the balance of trying to give some depth or distinguish that blank bay, particularly at the second floor. And then we need to talk a little bit more about that external access to the basements there from the front, because it does some awkward things to that porch and to the rhythm and kind of like it claws out something from the elevation. I think that's something we need to have, and we can have, as I said, conversations, more than happy to come up with ideas, because my goal is if we look at something, to come to the commission and I say, I think this, this works, but it's Kevin, it's your design, it has to have your personality and things like that, but I think in order to fit with everything else, I think that needs maybe to have a little bit more thought to it. And I know this is just a concept, a very developed concept, which is great, right? I thought, look, this is so cool to have all this information.
I'll just, I tried the idea of a side access, but the thought was it would just be too visible. That is within that 12-foot width at the front, continue a full 26 feet of width of the porch across. To repeat myself, the intention is that really be a social space. The space immediately inside is a library. And then opens up into a 2-story dining room, which is kind of integrated with the library, and we hope to have parties on the front porch, etc. So the temptation with that consideration is to extend the porch floor the full width. The alternative to get down to the basement is a side areaway going, straight down from, visible from the street. And I just think that is ugly, to dial direct. I have some ideas about a pergola over the 6-foot walkway that goes to the back. It's leading to a garden, so a garden style ornament, I think, would be appropriate to it. There is I don't need to tell you guys, some of the gardens in Newcastle are really pretty spectacular, and they've got architectural elements that are comparable to that. So having the access to the basement, the strictly servicing immediately adjacent to that seems a kind of contradicts you in adjectivo, as they say in Latin.
But a lot of them also have rear accesses to basements, because typically basement access was meant to be secondary, not something that would be so prominent as being seen from coming. But I mean, this is us kind of
Yeah, we can
theoretically
have this
talking about these
conversation. I
conversations.
thought about that, and again, I'm worried about high-driven floods coming from the river.
Mhm.
So that's the reason for protecting access to a basement and putting it on the strand side, which is a couple feet higher than the rear. So anyway, we do,
Yeah, again, these are,
You
know,
have
these would
given
be-
far more thought to this than anyone sitting at this table.
I think,
And you have far more skin in the game.
that is.
yeah, I
true.
believe those are probably solar panels.
So that was.
And I think, yeah, those are solar panels, correct, I'm assuming.
Yes, that the hope is that, and they'll, the attic is large enough to handle the management of the, now solar arrays are amazing. They are individually controlled so that you can tell if a panel is out and cut off the lines to it. I just did a big installation in Cushing, Maine, covered the entire south side of a new barn that I designed, with solar panels. Anyway, the hope is that we won't quite be able to go off grid, but you will be greener because of that. Electric prices down here are a lot less in Connecticut, by the way. Anyway, maybe I should just say, unless there are more questions, I should just say thank you very much. This is helpful, both in terms of specifics and attitude. I will absolutely address
Yeah.
get back to you.
And I'm sorry, I just don't have the business cards with me, but if you reach out to Marika at the city, or if you have an email, I'd be happy to send you an email. And if you have any questions or want to discuss ideas or thoughts, please, okay, thank you, I'll send you an email.
Thank you for coming to our town and investing in our mutual futures.
Absolutely. Thank
Oh,
you.
man.
It is a beautiful town,
It
I
is.
have to say.
That is your understatement quota for today.
You're a bit of a historian, yes?
I like to think of myself as
How does the town as charming as, this doesn't relate to your property, in your opinion? How does a town as charming as Newcastle avoid being turned into an Alexandria or commercialized to death like an old town, Charleston?
I can.
What's that line between it's hokey pokey or we've maximized the value?
The key to it is mixed use and mixed income. One of the beauties of Newcastle is the variety of houses, larger houses, smaller houses, and they are generally well kept up, but there seem to be a variety of income levels here. And you need that for a healthy, balanced community. And you need a general consciousness among all the residents of being in a place, even if people can't name details, that is significant. And the holidays that you have here, the Separation Day holiday, we encountered that without knowing it the first time. Big parade, what's this all about? No idea. And then there's the historic house tour day, or what is it called? Old Newcastle.
Day in Old Newcastle.
It's and maintaining the symbolic elements, the way that the jail is now getting worked on is very good. Usually I don't like one-way streets. I think that they're bad for business. And it allows cars to go too fast. But the one-way street system here in Newcastle doesn't seem to harm things. So you
Depends which one-way street you live on.
Well, let me just say, I have designed several new communities in which some of the streets are called yield streets, where they're so narrow that everybody's got to slow down and you yield to the person coming the other direction. The last thing that you want is something that's, as well intentioned as Colonial Williamsburg. It's to a degree useful for instruction in history, but it's not the real thing. And there ain't nothing like the real thing, baby, and they're not making more of it.
Let's believe that the foundation that rebuilt Williamsburg originally wanted to buy this town. but
I'd heard that.
So
Yeah, the Rockefeller money.
They never got it. Yeah.
they
that
didn't
was
want to
me.
come before the Historic Area Commission. But there are things permitted in done in Williamsburg and permitted at the White House and done at, Winter Tour, which is a little country house up the road, that aren't permitted in this town. For good or bad reasons. We don't have it perfectly, sorted out. But we do keep the nature of the town as it is, and we will for another few centuries.
Mhm.
But the allure, investment money is
That's-
huge. And that, I don't know how to, if someone comes in and says, I've got the idea that will make this a wonderful town, it's very hard for rather mortal people in positions of, governance in this town to find reasons why they should not agree.
There's an historic town called Chester, Connecticut, which is a little further down the river. Wonderful place. If I were a Disney Imagineer, I could not invent a more economical way of presenting a wonderful historic downtown with a minimal amount of material. Without getting into the geometry, it's sort of three sides, and in any event, a church very close to the downtown, which is struggling for money and parishioners, has been approached by a developer who wants to build 40 units of quote unquote affordable housing there. Under a statute, Connecticut has a statute called 830G, which says that a developer or owner have the right to build if the town has under 10% of affordable housing in it. And they are approaching. They just applied to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've been hired by a group of local residents to show alternatives to this kind of thing.
Meaning this bill, which is intended to promote affordable housing, has been used
It has
in
been
places
used as-
where
Yeah.
just inflation and appreciation because of
Yeah.
inequality has
and
put
go.
things out of
They
proportion.
want to put 40 monopoly houses. There are actually 6 apartment buildings that are shaped like monopoly houses with about the same amount of detailing. And my job is to show how you can get the same amount of taxes out of something that actually fits into the neighborhood better. So that's waiting for me when I go back to my office on actually tomorrow. It's a complicated business. It can start with something as seemingly dumb as people learning to draw. There is nothing like the act. It's because it's kinesthetic, because your learning is via your eye and your hand moving, like drawing something to really begin to understand it. I've been on the final jury for 20 plus years of something called the Ange Jacques Gabriel Prize, which is given each year to a young American architect to go pursue a drawing and watercolor painting project in France for a 6-month period. And the stuff that people come back with, and then they see
Come back with as part of
as,
the,
as a production from being a Gabrielle Laurier. They then go back to their communities, and almost uniformly what they act as is cloud seeding for other people wanting and architects wanting to learn how to draw stuff. And in order to draw, and you've really got to look. There's no offense to anybody who doesn't draw on a regular basis, but you understand the world better when you draw it, and I think you appreciate the solidity, the gravitas in all senses of history when you can get it into your mind via your body. Drawing, I've long said people should have drawing in as part of their regular education from kindergarten forward, not just crayons, but
because of the benefit it brings so many other things.
yeah, benefit and there's a whole panoply of things that should be in the toolkit to answer your question, how to make sure historic Newcastle, and there are very few places like this. Saint Genevieve, Missouri, which was an old French settlement on the Missouri River, is actually pretty special. And there's a German community called Herman, Missouri, which they're much smaller, but they have some of the qualities of historic Newcastle. If you're ever in Missouri, despite Josh Hayward, then I encourage you to visit Saint Genevieve and Herman. Herman in particular has it's a wonderful place, and they actually helped save the French wine industry, because there was a blight that was affecting the French vines, and the Herman had a variety of wines. You could graft the French stock onto the wines from Herman, Missouri, and that saved a lot of the French wine industry in, I think it was the 1920s, and it was because of the love of history in that place and it rebounded to Europe. It's wild. Look up Herman, Missouri. It's like the Herman, the great anti-Roman hero.
Once you get settled, you go to do a lecture series for the town.
Don't get me tempted.
Once you get settled, you're still talking to us.
Well, thank you, everybody. To be
Yeah.
continued.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward to the next steps.
I'd like to make a motion to end the meeting.
I'd like to talk about the gas pipes and the pressure regulators.
So because that we didn't submit that into it wasn't put into the agenda, I think we need to wait until the August meeting.
Can we get, when's the August meeting?
Because we.
No, that's fine. I mean, I
We just
understand
need
the
to make
motivation.
we need to make the public aware that this is going to be discussed. We have to follow the process, so
They can come and bring feedback.
yeah, and I'm not saying, I think.
No, I
we-
think the
I think
feedback
we
goes to
should-
the town, but I understand.
But I think they need to be aware of what we're discussing. That's the process, but I
No,
I
I'm
think it's
sorry.
something we should
My
discuss.
concern is August, like. What date is the,
The second Thursday of,
Yeah, San Miguel's council.
second Thursday? That would be the 10th.
I don't have a calendar in front of me, it sounds right. You might want to postpone until September.
10th is good for me. I'm away and away, but I'm back
Thank
that
you
week.
again, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Safe travels back.
Very nice
I-
talking with you.
I asked Marika.
Can we add it,
email
make
today.
sure it gets on the agenda?
I asked Marika in the email today to add it to the agenda and she said she would. So
Because I've given this a tremendous amount of thought and, you know, we put people through what we put them through and for good reason. And any homeowner coming before this table asking to put a pipe in front of their house with an 8-inch disc on it, and I know what the answer is gonna be. You can't do it. And the fact that somebody wants to do it to 2 houses doesn't make it a simpler answer than for one. If you're doing for 200, you better have some answers other than it's what we do over in Claymont, or we do it in St. Louis, Missouri. So I think just for the basically like the integrity of the commission, if we're speaking as we do speak to individual homeowners, we have to say, we have to have a voice that we advise to the council about our position on what's happened, because there are ways to make it less intrusive.
that's it. August 10th.
It doesn't.
I'd like to make a motion to end this meeting. A second.
Second.
All those in favor?
I, you were quiet tonight.
Huh?
You were quiet.
I'm an absorber, I absorb. You guys are clearly a little more knowledgeable